My husband's childhood best friend moved into our guest house until I found his observation log on my kitchen tablet. There is a particular kind of discomfort that settles in your stomach when you realize the person you invited into your sanctuary is documenting your life like a lab experiment. We thought we were being kind when Marcus, my husband's oldest friend, returned from overseas with nothing but a few suitcases and a story about a failed venture. We opened our guest house to him. It was supposed to be a temporary sanctuary, a few months for him to get back on his feet while he transitioned into a new chapter of his career. For the first month, Marcus was the perfect guest. He was charming, helpful, and seemingly grateful, but slowly the atmosphere in our home shifted. I began to notice small, unsettling discrepancies. Things moved on my desk, private conversations echoed back to me in ways that felt calculated, and a strange cold distance grew between my husband, David, and me. I assumed it was just the stress of having an extra person in our daily orbit. That was until I walked into the kitchen late one Tuesday night to find my tablet open. It wasn't on the recipe app where I'd left it. It was on a hidden digital file labeled Project Audit. As I scrolled, my blood ran cold. It wasn't a diary. It was an exhaustive clinical observation log of our marriage. Every argument, every financial decision, every quiet moment of vulnerability David and I shared had been analyzed, timed, and categorized. Marcus wasn't just staying with us. He was auditing our lives, looking for the precise leverage points to dismantle our marriage from the inside out. He thought he was the architect of our downfall, but he had made one critical mistake. He assumed I was too distracted to notice the blueprints. This is the story of how I turned his own data-driven obsession into the very tool that secured his exit. When Marcus moved into the guest house, he brought with him a polished, high-energy charisma that filled the room. David was thrilled to have his brother back. They had been inseparable throughout their 20s, navigating the highs and lows of early career struggles together before Marcus took a job that kept him on the other side of the world for nearly a decade. Seeing them reconnect was, at first, one of the most rewarding things about the year. However, the change in Marcus wasn't overt. It was architectural. He began inserting himself into the rhythms of our home with a precision that bordered on synthetic. He didn't just ask about our day, he probed. He would sit at our dinner table, sipping wine, and ask highly specific questions about our household budget. David's confidence in his current management role and my own career trajectory. I initially dismissed it as him being interested in our success, but the questions became increasingly pointed. Doesn't it feel restrictive, David, knowing that your salary is essentially funding these specific lifestyle choices? He would ask, his tone casual yet probing. Most of our old peer group has already transitioned into equity-based roles. It's surprising you're still comfortable with a standard bonus structure. David would laugh it off, but I saw the seed of doubt Marcus was planting. He was systematically undermining David's self-worth, comparing our quiet, stable life to a version of reality that existed only in Marcus's distorted rearview mirror. The physical environment of our home began to feel invaded. I would find Marcus in the main house at odd hours, claiming he was looking for a specific book or that he needed to use the Wi-Fi in the main office because the connection in the guest house was unstable. I began to notice a strange stillness when I entered a room. Conversations would abruptly cut off, or Marcus would shift his posture into a defensive stance. The tension peaked when a significant decision regarding our savings, a plan David and I had discussed in the privacy of our bedroom, was suddenly brought up by Marcus at a casual Sunday brunch. He spoke about it as if he were a consultant we had hired, detailing the potential pitfalls of our investment and suggesting, with a subtle smirk, that perhaps I was the one pushing for the safer, more limited option. David looked at me, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. I felt a surge of cold clarity. Marcus wasn't just a guest. He was a strategic actor. He was observing, gathering data, and actively trying to reshape our home dynamic to suit his own agenda. I didn't get angry. I didn't confront him in front of David. I simply started watching him back, cataloging the subtle ways he tried to manipulate our trust. The incident with the tablet was the final, undeniable proof I needed. Seeing those clinical entries, Thorne household audit, day 42. Influence factor on subject A, David, increasing. Subject B, Elena, displays protective hesitation regarding asset allocation. Recommendation, increase friction points during communal dining. Was sickening. He was treating us like assets to be managed or liquidated. My first instinct was to print the logs and present them to David, but I stopped myself. Marcus was a master of narrative. If I confronted him with an accusation, he would immediately pivot, play the victim, and paint me as the paranoid, territorial wife who was jealous of a close brotherhood. I needed to be smarter than that. I needed to ensure that when he left on his own terms, realizing he had absolutely no control here. I spent the next 3 days acting as if nothing had happened. I kept the tablet in the same place, even leaving it unlocked occasionally. I wanted him to believe he was still in control of the information flow. Meanwhile, I began to subtly alter the data he was collecting. I started leaving documents in plain sight, fictitious emails regarding a troubled investment account that I knew he was tracking. I spoke in hushed, worried tones to David on the phone about hypothetical career shifts that were designed to sound tempting, but were actually career-ending moves. Marcus took the bait every time. I watched from the periphery as his behavior changed. He became more confident, more aggressive in his attempts to steer David toward the new opportunities I had supposedly planted. He started spending more time in the main office, believing he was on the verge of a breakthrough in his audit. He was so busy analyzing the data that he completely failed to realize the data had been compromised. The psychological tension in the house reached a boiling point. David began to feel the shift, not because of what Marcus was doing, but because of the way I was now operating. I was calm, collected, and increasingly distant from the guest house inhabitant. Marcus noticed, of course, and his logs reflected a growing frustration. Observation. Subject B is behaving with unexpected predictability. However, consistency in data patterns is reaching the threshold. For the final push, he was out, setting the stage for his final move. Likely an attempt to get David to commit to a major life change that would have left our finances and our stability in tatters. He thought he was inches from victory. He had no idea that I had already built the trap, and that the only thing left was to trigger it. The final push came on a rainy Thursday evening. David was in the city for a late board meeting, and Marcus walked into the main house, uninvited, with a bottle of expensive scotch. He walked over to the kitchen island, his expression one of forced, jovial camaraderie. "Elena, you should have seen the potential in those papers you were reviewing," he said, gesturing to the desk where I had strategically left the fake documents. David is lucky to have someone who considers the bigger picture. But you know, if he's going to make this move, he needs a partner who understands the risks. You seem a bit hesitant. That's understandable, of course. It's a lot to manage. I looked at him, my expression neutral. "You've been very involved in our future, Marcus. It's touching, really. I was just looking at the household tablet earlier. It's amazing how much data you've managed to organize." The air in the room seemed to vanish. Marcus froze, the bottle of scotch hovering inches from the glass. He didn't blink. He just stared at me, his face a mask of calculated indifference. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Elena," he said, his voice dropping an octave, losing its warmth. "I think you do," I said, opening my laptop on the kitchen island. I had mirrored the contents of the tablet onto the larger screen. "It's a fascinating project, Marcus. The detail is incredible. The way you cataloged David's weaknesses, that was a particularly insightful touch. It's impressive, really, how you've managed to turn 20 years of friendship into a spreadsheet." Marcus tried to stand his ground. "You're reading into things, Elena. It's not what you think. It's just observations to help my friend." "You aren't his friend," I replied, my voice steady, devoid of heat. "A friend doesn't track their partner's insecurities to benefit their own narrative. You're a consultant for a firm that no longer exists, and you're looking for a soft landing. You thought you could audit our marriage and find a vacancy for yourself, but there isn't one." He began to sputter, his charm completely gone, replaced by a cold, desperate aggression. He reached for his phone, perhaps to call David, but I just smiled. "David is already on his way home," I said. "And before he gets here, I want you to know that the tablet is now synced to his phone as well. He's seen the logs, Marcus. He saw the entries from the day you arrived to the fake opportunities I let you discover this week. He's been reading along for the last 2 days. Marcus turned pale. The confidence he had built over months of surveillance crumbled in an instant. He knew better than anyone that David's loyalty was ironclad when it came to his wife. He had bet everything on the idea that I was the weak link in our marriage, never realizing that I was the one holding the entire structure together. David didn't scream when he walked through the door. He didn't even acknowledge Marcus's presence at first. He walked directly to me, hugged me, and then turned to look at his brother. It was a look of profound, quiet disappointment, the kind that cuts deeper than any shout. "I read it all, Marcus," David said, his voice low. "Every entry. I didn't believe it at first. I thought there had to be a mistake. But then I saw the patterns. You weren't helping me. You were waiting for me to break." Marcus tried to say something, a pathetic, stammering excuse, but David silenced him with a single gesture. "The guest house needs to be empty by morning. I've already contacted the security firm to change the locks and clear the perimeter. I don't want to hear from you again. Not tonight, not ever." Marcus left without another word. The silence that followed his departure was the most profound peace I had ever felt in my own home. We didn't talk about it for the rest of the night. We didn't need to. The data had spoken, and it had been decisively debunked. The next morning, The guest house was empty. The following week, we went through our lives with a renewed sense of security. It wasn't about what Marcus had done, but what he had taught us. He had forced us to look at the foundations of our life together, to see where we were vulnerable, and to close those gaps. I learned that transparency is the most powerful weapon in any relationship. By observing Marcus observing us, I had not only protected our home, but also strengthened the trust between David and me in a way I hadn't thought possible. We were no longer just a couple. We were a team that was aware, focused, and completely unified against any external attempt at disruption. As I sat in the kitchen that final weekend, sipping coffee and watching the sunlight hit the table, I thought about the tablet. I had wiped the project from the system, leaving nothing but a clean, empty screen. There was no more auditing, no more observing, and no more external leverage. There was only our life, and it was entirely ours again. Marcus had thought he was writing the story of our downfall, but in the end, he was nothing more than a brief, instructive chapter in a much longer, stronger narrative. He had wanted to find the cracks, but all he did was highlight the strength of the bond that he could never hope to break.